Hebrew scriptures the river is regularly referred to by the term or sometimes Yo. The word itself means stream or canal as at Daniel 12:5 and Isaiah 33:21, or water-filled gallery, a shaft made in mining, as at Job 28:10. In one case Ur is used to refer to the Tigris River, biblical hydacle of Mesopotamia. Dar 12:5-7. Compare 10:4. All other occurrences, the context indicates, apply to the Nile or, when in the plural form, to the Nile canals. PS 78:44. Issa 7:18. The Egyptian name Jow for the river, at least from the so-called 18th dynasty on, corresponds closely to the Hebrew. The course of the Nile. The Nile is generally ranked as the longest river on earth. Its length of 6,671 kilometers 4,145 mi is measured from its sources, which take their rise in the lake regions of modern Rwanda and Burundi. These sources flow into Lake Victoria, and from here a river passes over to Lake Albert, Lake Mobata, Sezi Seko. Farther north the stream is known as the White Nile. At Khartoum, the White Nile is joined by the Blue Nile, which cascades down from the mountains of northern Ethiopia. North of Khartoum the river forms the Nile proper, and as such receives the waters of only one more tributary, the Atbara River, its confluence with the Nile occurring about 300 kilometers 190 mi of Khartoum. The Nile then winds its way through the desolate Tabligh land of northern Sudan, passing over 6 separate beds of hard granite rock that create 6 cataracts between Khartoum and Aswan, biblical Sin, the point where Nubia ended, and ancient Egypt, typical scene along the Nile in Egypt. Nile 501 Gan. Finally, having lost much of its volume, because of evaporation by the blazing sun and the demands of Egyptian irrigation, some 2,700 kilometers 1,700 mi of Khartoum, the Nile's waters empty into the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile Valley is quite narrow along most of the river's course. Through much of Nubia the river flows through a gorge, bordered on each side by the desert. North of Aswan, in what was Upper Egypt, the valley broadens out, but the rocky cliffs on either side are never much more than about 20 kilometers 12 mi apart. However, when the river reaches the region just end of modern Cairo it divides into 2 main branches, now called the Rosetta and the Damietta, after the names of the port cities situated at the mouths of these branches on the Mediterranean coast. This fanning out of the Nile's waters creates the swampy Nile Delta. In ancient times the river had other branches, the classical Greek historians and geographers making mention of from 5 to 7. These branches and some of the canals have since become silted up and either greatly reduced or eliminated. Importance of annual flooding. The unique characteristic of this major river is the regularity of its rise each year and the consequent flooding of its banks that are lined with agricultural villages. This is produced by the heavy seasonal rains as well as the melting of snow from the mountains in Ethiopia, which convert the Blue Nile into a torrential stream rushing toward its junction with the White Nile, carrying with it rich silt from the Ethiopian highlands. The Atbara River also adds an increased flow to swell the volume of the Nile. Prior to the construction of the Aswan High Dam, this caused the river to begin to rise in Egypt from June onward, cresting in September and thereafter gradually receding. On receding, the waters left behind a deposit of highly fertile soil in the form of a thin layer of mud. In a virtually rainless land, Egyptian agriculture was totally dependent upon these annual inundations of the lowlands. An insufficient rise had the same effect as drought, bringing famine. While an excessive rise brought damage to the irrigation works as well as to homes. The concern of the Egyptians for a desirable amount of inundation is seen in the Nilometer gauges for measuring the river's level that have been discovered at ancient sites. Without these inundations the never-distant desert would press in from both sides right up to the riverbanks. Yet the Nile's rise and fall has, with few exceptions, been so regular that Egypt throughout its history was noted for its abundant crops and agricultural wealth. This complete reliance of the Egyptian economy on the Nile's waters was well illustrated in Pharaoh's dream, the 7 fat cows proceeding out of the Nile and feeding on the Nile grass, while the 7 thin cows came from the same source. This aptly represented the way good production could be eaten up by poor years resulting from insufficient inundation. G 41. 17-21. The surging of the Nile waters over their banks was used to describe the forward push of marching armies. G 46. 7, 8. 47. 2, 3, while the prophet Amos used the rising and falling of the Nile River Medidara and Enese Delta Edsa Nilea for Memphis Thebes no Arman 1 St cataract S1 sin 2 Nd cataract 3 RD cataract 4 Th cataract 5 Th cataract 2 BRARIVER 6 Th cataract Khartoum BLUEN LEWH at NILE Lake Albert Lake Victoria FRIC Nile Iowa Nile canals 502 Nile's waters to represent the agitation due to come upon unfaithful Israel. 8. 9. 5 other prophets employed the figure of the Nile's drying up to represent the disaster due to come upon Egypt as a result of God's judgment against the nation. The Nile's failure would not only cripple agriculture and the raising of stock, but also damage the fishing industry and the production of linen. Issa 19. 1, 5-10. Es 29. 9, 10. Zik 10. 11. To retain some of the floodwaters for later use in irrigation during the growing season, the Egyptians built up earthen embankments to trap the muddy waters in large catch basins. Thus when Jehovah brought the first plague on Egypt, turning its water to blood, the Nile itself, the water in its canals and reedy pools, and the impounded waters were all converted into blood. X 7. 14-25. Other features. Besides supplying water for plants and domestic animals, the Nile was the source of drinking water for the Egyptians. X 7. 18, 21, 24 Except during the initial stage of inundation, the water was very palatable. Along the Nile's canals and reedy pools, papyrus plants grew in abundance. These were the source of Egyptian writing material and were used for making boats. Issa 18. 2 The reedy shores and pools were the habitat of many wild birds that fed upon frogs and other small creatures. X 8. 5, 9-11 Egyptian pictures show bird hunting being done from small boats. The Nile waters served, too, for bathing. It is recorded that Pharaoh's daughter bathed there. X 2. 5 An Egyptian picture presents a very similar bathing scene of a noble woman with her 4 female attendants. The Nile was also the principal highway for the entire land. Boats heading in traveled downstream on the current, while those heading us upstream were pushed along by the prevailing winds moving inland from the Mediterranean Sea on the north. Commercial ships from Phoenicia and Crete were able to go upstream all the way to Thebes biblical No Arman. Na 3. 8 and beyond. The Nile figured prominently in Egyptian defenses against invasion. Its cataracts to the east made the land difficult to attack from the direction of Nubia Ethiopia, while the swampy land around the delta region hindered the entrance of large armies from the Asiatic continent. Some scholars suggest that Assyrian king Sennacherib's boast of drying up all the Nile canals with his feet signified his confidence in his being able to overcome defensive water-filled moats around Egyptian cities and strongholds. 2K 19. 24. The Nile's cycles served as the basis for the seasonal calendar of the Egyptians, with 3 famine seasons. Akhet, or inundation. Peret, the coming forth evidently of the land as the waters returned to their banks. And Shamu, the dry season summer. The period just after the waters were highest was that of the greatest activity. When high water levels prevailed, construction work was programmed to provide a measure of employment. The symbol of the great sea monster lying stretched out in the midst of the Nile canals, applied to Pharaoh in the book of Ezekiel, is thought to be drawn from the crocodiles that have inhabited the Nile from ancient times. Es 29. 3-5 Frequent, 2. Was the hippopotamus, generally identified with the animal designated as behemoth at Job 40. 15. The Egyptians worshipped the Nile as a god of fertility under the name Hapi. This god was depicted as basically male, but with large feminine breasts, the head crowned with aquatic plants, and a fisherman's girdle around the plump waist. Festivals, with accompanying sacrifices, were held annually in his honor at the beginning of each inundation period. Some scholars suggest that Pharaoh's going out to the Nile, mentioned at Exodus 7. 15, relates to some morning devotional act, though it may have been merely for a morning walk or to examine the height of the river. Nile canals. Irrigation canals branching Otex to Acute Muritra Longo, Nineveh 503 Kata location in the Es of Moab. Thus many prefer identification with the Wadi Namera, which flows down into the send of the Dead Sea about 17 km 11 MWSW of Karak. The prophecies foretell that these waters will become mere desolations, either in a figurative sense, because of the desolating of the land, or perhaps because of damming up of their streams by enemy forces. Nimrod, son of Cush. 1ch1. 10 The rabbinic writings derived the name Nimrod from the Hebrew verb marmidal.rad, meaning rebel. Thus, the Babylonian Talmud Erubin 53a states, "Why, then, was he called Nimrod? Because he stirred up the whole world to rebel against his God's sovereignty." Encyclopedia of Biblical Interpretation, by Menahem M. Gasher, Volume 2, 1955, p. 79. Nimrod was the founder and king of the first empire to come into existence after the flood. He distinguished himself as a mighty hunter before in an unfavorable sense. Heb. Lipmiddle.net. Against or in opposition to. Compare New 16. 2. 1ch14. 8. 2ch14. 10 or in front of Jehovah. GE 10. 9. FTN. Although in this case some scholars attach a favorable sense to the Hebrew preposition meaning in front of, the Jewish Targums, the writings of the historian Josephus, and also the context of Genesis chapter 10 suggest that Nimrod was a mighty hunter in defiance of Jehovah. The beginning of Nimrod's kingdom included the cities of Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Karnak, all in the land of Shinar. GE 10. 10. Therefore it was likely under his direction that the building of Babel and its tower began. This conclusion is also in agreement with the traditional Jewish view. Wrote Josephus. Nimrod little by little transformed the state of affairs into a tyranny, holding that the only way to detach men from the fear of God was by making them continuously dependent upon his own power. He threatened to have his revenge on God if he wished to inundate the earth again. For he would build a tower higher than the water could reach and avenge the destruction of their forefathers. The people were eager to follow this advice of Nimrod, deeming it slavery to submit to God. So they set out to build the tower. And it rose with a speed beyond all expectation. Jewish Antiquities, I, 114, 115 4, 2, 3. It appears that after the building of the Tower of Babel, Nimrod extended his domain to the territory of Assyria and there built Nineveh and Hoboth-ir and Calah and Resen between Nineveh and Calah. This is the great city. GE 10. 11, 12. Compare Mic 5. 6. Since Assyria evidently derived its name from Shem's son Ashur, Nimrod, as a grandson of Ham, must have invaded Shemite territory. So it would seem that Nimrod made the start in becoming a mighty one or hero, not only as a hunter of animals, but also as a warrior, a man of aggression. GE 10. 8 observes the Cyclopedia by M. Clintock and Strong. That the mighty hunting was not confined to the chase is apparent from its close connection with the building of 8 cities. What Nimrod did in the chase as a hunter was the earlier token of what he achieved as a conqueror. For hunting and heroism were of old especially and naturally associated. The Assyrian monuments also picture many feats in hunting, and the word is often employed to denote campaigning. The chase and the battle, which in the same country were connected so closely in after times, may therefore be virtually associated or identified here. The meaning then will be, that Nimrod was the first after the flood to found a kingdom, to unite the fragments of scattered patriarchal rule, and consolidate them under himself as sole-headed master. And all this in defiance of Jehovah, for it was the violent intrusion of Hamitic power into a Shemitic territory. 1894, Volume 7, p. 109. Concerning deification of Nimrod, see gods and goddesses of Babylonian deities. Nimshi. Father of Jehoshaphat Textoi Acute Muritra Longo, Nineveh 504 Qunjik. However, excavations have brought to light much that testifies to Nineveh's past glory. The findings include thousands of cuneiform tablets from Ashurbanipal's library and the ruins of the palace of Sennacherib and that of Ashurbanipal. These palaces were impressive structures. Based on his findings, Sir Austin Layard wrote, "The interior of the Assyrian palace must have been as magnificent as imposing. I have led the reader through its ruins, and he may judge of the impression its halls were calculated to make upon the stranger who in the days of old entered for the first time the abode of the Assyrian kings. He was ushered in through the portal guarded by the colossal lions or bulls of white alabaster. In the first hall he found himself surrounded by the sculptured records of the empire. Battles, sieges, triumphs, the exploits of the chase, the ceremonies of religion, were portrayed on the walls, sculptured in alabaster, and painted in gorgeous colors. Under each picture were engraved, in characters filled up with bright copper, inscriptions describing the scenes represented. Above the sculptures were painted other events. The king, attended by his eunuchs and warriors, receiving his prisoners, entering into alliances with other monarchs, or performing some sacred duty. These representations were enclosed in colored borders, of elaborate and elegant design. The emblematic tree, winged bulls, and monstrous animals, were conspicuous amongst the ornaments. At the upper end of the hall was the colossal figure of the king in adoration before the supreme deity, receiving from his eunuch the holy cup. He was attended by warriors bearing his arms, and by the priests or presiding divinities. His robes, and those of his followers, were adorned with groups of figures, animals, and flowers, all painted with brilliant colors. The stranger trod upon alabaster slabs, each bearing an inscription, recording the titles, genealogy, and achievements of the great king. Several doorways, formed by gigantic winged lions or bulls, or by the figures of guardian deities, lead into other apartments, which again opened into more distant halls. In each were new sculptures. On the walls of some were processions of colossal figures. Armed men and eunuchs following the king, warriors laden with spoil, leading prisoners, or bearing presents and offerings to the gods. On the walls of others were portrayed the winged priests, or presiding divinities, standing before the sacred trees. The ceilings above him were divided into square compartments, painted with flowers, or with the figures of animals. Some were inlaid with ivory, each compartment being surrounded by elegant borders and mouldings. The beams, as well as the sides of the chambers, may have been gilded, or even plated, with gold and silver. And the rarest woods, in which the cedar was conspicuous, were used for the woodwork. Square openings in the ceilings of the chambers admitted the light of day. Nineveh and its Remains, 1856, Part 2, pages 207-209. In the time of Jonah. Jehovah's prophet Jonah, in the 9th century BCE declared impending doom for Nineveh because of the wickedness of its inhabitants. However, since the people, including the king, repented, Jehovah spared the city. John 1. 1, 2, 3, 2, 5-10. At that time Nineveh was a great city, with a walking distance of 3 days. John 3. 3. Its population numbered more than 120,000 men. John 4. 11. This biblical description is not controverted by archaeological evidence. Observed André Parrot, Curator-in-Chief of the French National Museums. Just as today, that part of London which lies within its ancient boundary is very different from what is called Greater London, a term which includes the suburbs and denotes a much larger area. So it may be that people who lived far away from Assyria understood by the word Nineveh what is now known as the Assyrian Otextoe Acute Muritra Longo, Nisan 505, when the combined forces of Nabopolassar the king of Babylon and of Cyaxares the Mede besieged and captured Nineveh. The city was evidently subjected to burning, for many Assyrian reliefs show damage or stain from fire and accompanying smoke. The Babylonian Chronicle on Nineveh's destruction reports: they carried off the vast booty of the city and the temple, and turned the city into a ruined heap. Assyrian and Babylonian Chronicles, by A. Grayson, 1975, p. 94. Picture, Volume 1, p. 958. To this day Nineveh is a desolate waste, and in the spring, flocks graze near or atop the Mount of Kunjek. Date of Nineveh's fall. Though effaced from the extant cuneiform tablet that relates the fall of Nineveh, the date for this event, the 14th year of Nabopolassar, can be supplied from the context. It is also possible to place the destruction of Nineveh in the framework of Bible chronology. According to a Babylonian chronicle, the Egyptians were defeated at Karchemish in the 21st year of Nabopolassar's reign. The Bible shows this to have taken place in the 4th year of Jehoiakim's reign, or in 625 BCE, just 46. 2. Therefore, the capture of Nineveh about 7 years earlier in the 14th year of Nabopolassar's reign would fall in the year 632 BCE. See Assyria, the fall of the empire. Nisan and Nisan. The post-exilic name of the first Jewish lunar month of the sacred calendar, corresponding to part of March and part of April. Ne2. 1. S3. 7. This month, first called Abib, was originally considered the 7th month and is evidently the month referred to at Genesis 8. 4. At the time of the Exodus from Egypt, Jehovah assigned this month to be the first of the months of the year. X12. 2. 13. 4. New 33. 3. From then on, a distinction existed between a sacred calendar instituted by Jehovah and the previous secular calendar. See calendar. Abib. The weather was often quite cool during this spring month, and in Jerusalem, fires were lit at night to provide warmth. Joe 18. 18. Snow has even fallen in Jerusalem as late as April the 6th, as it did in 1949. Nisan came at about the close of the rainy season, and the latter or spring rains were counted on to bring the grain to fullness prior to the harvest. Ger 11. 14. Ho 6. 3. Ger 5. 24. At this time of the year the Jordan River was normally at flood stage. Jos 3. 15. 1 Ch 12. 15. The barley harvest began along the coastal plains, and down in the subtropical Jordan Valley the wheat was reaching maturity. Ru 1. 22. 2. 23. About this time, harvested flax on Rahab's rooftop in Jericho provided a place for the Israelite spies to hide. Jos 2. 6. 4. 19. Adjusting the lunar calendar. God's command required that the Israelites offer up a sheaf of the first fruits of their harvest on the 16th day of Nisan Abib, and that, on the 50th day thereafter, they offer up a second grain offering. These offerings corresponded naturally with the barley and wheat harvests, respectively. This precept made essential an adjustment in the calendar of lunar months used by the Israelites. There was need to compensate for the difference of 111/4 days between the full solar year and the shorter lunar year. Otherwise, within the space of 3 years, the month of Nisan would arrive some 33 days earlier in the season and far ahead of the barley harvest. The Bible record does not specify what method was originally used by the Israelites to accomplish such coordination, but the evidence indicates that a 13th month was added every 2 or 3 years to restore the seasons to their proper position in the calendar year. It seems likely that it was determined by simple observation, relating the new moon to the vernal, or spring, equinox of the sun, which comes about March the 21st of each year. If the new moon that would ordinarily mark the start of the month of Nisan Abib was too distant from the time of the spring equinox, then the month was counted as a 13th, or in Turculario Textoi Acute Miritra Longo. Nishrok 506. Nisan continues to be observed by his followers till this day as the time for memorializing Christ's death. Lu 22. 19, 20. See Lord's Evening Meal. Nisrok. A deity worshipped by Sennacherib the king of Assyria. It was in the temple of Nisroch that Adrammelech and Sharezer murdered their father Sennacherib. 2K 19. 36, 37. Issa 37. 38. A number of scholars suggest identifying Nisroch with the fire god Nusku, who, it was thought, assisted in bringing defeat to the enemy in warfare and served as messenger of the gods as well as a dispenser of justice. However, certain identification of Nisroch with a known Assyrian deity is not now possible. No Amun no Amunte from Egyptian, meaning city of Amun, an Egyptian god. A prominent city and one-time capital of Egypt, located on both banks of the Upper Nile about 530 kilometers 330 miles of Cairo. The Greeks knew it as Thebes, the name commonly used today. Some scholars in the past have held that the Hebrew No is an incorrect rendering of the Egyptian name. J 46. 25. However, Professor Theo Lamdin points out that recent investigations in Egypto-Coptic phonology indicate that the Hebrew spelling may well be correct and may reflect an earlier Egyptian pronunciation. The problem is further complicated by uncertainty on the part of Egyptologists regarding the precise consonantal reading of the Egyptian word itself. The Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, edited by G. A. Buttrick, 1962, Volume 4, pages 615, 616. In ancient Egyptian texts the city is called the city of Amen. This is because it became the principal center of the worship of the god Amen, who rose from being a minor deity to the position of chief god of the nation, equated by the Greeks with Zeus Jupiter. See Amen No. 4. Here the pharaohs built enormous monuments and temples, covering an extensive area on the E-bank of the Nile at Karnak and Luxor, with other magnificent temples and a huge burial ground on the W-bank. The Temple of Amen at Karnak is considered the largest columnar structure ever built, some of its massive columns measuring some 3.5 meters, 12 feet in diameter. Becomes Egypt's capital, particularly during the period that is termed the New Kingdom or Empire. Dynasties 18-20, Thebes attained great prominence, becoming the capital of the land. Here, the long distance from the sea and from the land bridge to Asia afforded good protection from that direction. It may be that, because of a very weak and discredited government in Lower Egypt following the Israelite exodus, the royalty of Upper Egypt took advantage of the situation and gained the ascendancy. At any rate, there is evidence of considerable reorganization at this time. Center of priesthood. Even when administrative control shifted to other sites, No Amen Thebes continued to be a wealthy and prominent city, the center of the powerful priesthood of Amen, whose chief priest ranked next to Pharaoh himself in power and wealth. But in the 7th century BCE Assyrian aggression spread into Egypt during the rule of Assyrian king Esarhaddon. His son and successor Ashurbanipal renewed the conquest, reaching Thebes and thoroughly sacking the city. It is evidently to this devastation that the prophet Nahum referred when warning Nineveh, Assyria's capital, about a destruction of similar magnitude. Nah 3. 7-10 No Amen's defenses, stretching across the road from Palestine and on up the Nile, failed, and the riches from her commercial traffic and religious temples became the prize of the ransacking Assyrians. Brought to ruin. Yet, by the close of the 7th century or the early part of the 6th century, No Amen had regained a position of some prominence. Jeremiah and Ezekiel foretold a judgment by Jehovah God upon Egypt's chief god, Amen of No, and upon Pharaoh and all the Egyptian gods, which judgment would come by the hand of Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Jer 46. O texto e acute miritra longo, Noah 507 Noah, he said. This one will bring us comfort from our work and from the pain of our hands resulting from the ground which Jehovah has cursed. Ge 5. 28-31. Faultless among his contemporaries. The world in which Noah lived had become degenerate. During this period angels who left their original position and proper dwelling place had married women and produced offspring, men of fame, whipping up the violence filling the earth. Ge 6. 1-4. Jude 6, until every inclination of the thoughts of man's heart was only bad all the time and the earth became ruined, because all flesh had ruined its way on the earth. Ge 6. 5, 11, 12 But Noah avoided this corruption and is described by God's word as a righteous man. He proved himself faultless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with the true God. Ge 6. 8, 9 Noah could be spoken of as faultless because, unlike that ungodly world, he measured up fully to what God required of him. Compare Ge 6. 22. See perfection. Jehovah purposes to destroy that world. Jehovah set a time limit for the existence of that ungodly world, saying, My spirit shall not act toward man indefinitely in that he is also flesh. Accordingly his days shall amount to 120 years. Ge 6. 3 This was a divine judicial decree. About 20 years after that, Noah's first son probably Japheth was born 2470 BCE and the record shows that another son, Shem, was born 2 years later. The time of Ham's birth is not stated, but these 3 sons were grown and married when the divine instructions were given to Noah to build an ark. Consequently, it is likely that only 40 or 50 years then remained before the deluge. Ge 6. 13-18 Now, brought into a covenant with Jehovah. Ge 6. 18 And assisted by his family, Noah set to work as a builder and a preacher of righteousness, warning that wicked generation of impending destruction. 2 Pe 2. 5. Preservation through the flood. the people did not believe that God would act to destroy a world of wickedness. So it was because Noah possessed strong faith that he, in implicit obedience, did according to all that God had commanded him. He did just so. Ge 6:22 It was because of his unswerving faith in Jehovah that the Christian writer of the book of Hebrews included him in that so great a cloud of witnesses. He wrote, "By faith Noah, after being given divine warning of things not yet beheld, showed godly fear and constructed an ark for the saving of his household. And through this faith he condemned the world, and he became an heir of the righteousness that is according to faith." Heb 11:7-12 1. 7 days before the flood waters began to fall, Jehovah instructed Noah to gather the animals into the ark. On the 7th day of that week, Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, into the ark ahead of the waters of the deluge. After that Jehovah shut the door behind him. On that very day the flood arrived and destroyed them all. Ge 7:1-16 Lu 17:27 With the ark's occupants was preserved the thread of human and animal life. Also, true worship survived, and by means of Noah and his family God carried through the history of creation, along with a system of counting time back to man's creation and the original language later called Hebrew. Noah kept an accurate log of important events during his stay in the ark. Ge 7:11-12-24 8 2-6, 10, 12-14 Post-flood blessing and rainbow covenant. After about 1 year in the ark, Noah and his family came out onto an earth freshly washed clean. The ark had come to rest in the mountains of the Ararat range. In appreciation for Jehovah's loving kindness, mercy, and protective hand, Noah constructed an altar and offered up some of all the clean beasts and of all the clean flying creatures as a sacrifice to Jehovah. Jehovah was pleased and revealed to Noah that no more would the earth be cursed, nor would God deal everything o text to a acute miritra longo. Nob 508 or reminder of this covenant. Ge 9:8-17 Isra 54:9 Noah's intoxication. Noah lived for 350 years after the flood. The account reports, candidly and honestly. Now Noah started off as a farmer and proceeded to plant a vineyard. And he began drinking of the wine and became intoxicated, and so he uncovered himself in the midst of his tent. Ge 9:20-21 This does not indicate that Noah was a habitual drunkard. The Bible reports this instance to give the background for the incident that accompanied it, which event had a profound effect on world history. Before the flood, Noah was not indulging in the drinking of that wicked society, which they doubtless carried to extremes of drunken revelry. Such things dulled their sensibilities and were no doubt a factor in their ignoring God's warning, taking no note until the flood came and swept them all away. Mount 24:38-39 Lu 17:27 While Noah was asleep in his tent, Ham, and perhaps also his son Canaan, became implicated in some sort of disrespect for Noah. The account reads, "Finally Noah awoke from his wine and got to know what his youngest son had done to him." Generally Ham is understood to be designated here as Noah's youngest son. However, in the Bible, the expression sometimes refers to grandson, who, in this case, was Canaan. Whatever the situation, Canaan's father Ham went telling it to his two brothers instead of himself covering Noah as they did. On learning of the episode, Noah cursed Canaan and blessed Shem's God Jehovah. Ge 9:20-27 Nimrod's rebellion. Noah was the first patriarch of the post-flood society. Ge 10:1-32 Nevertheless, during his lifetime false religion again rose up among those under the leadership of Nimrod, as is seen in their rebellious attempt to build a tower with its top in the heavens for fear that they might be scattered over all the surface of the earth. This was in direct opposition to God's command to fill the earth, and was a rebellion also against Noah's position as God's prophet. Noah died about 2 years before the birth of Abraham. He therefore got to see Jehovah's judgment on the builders of the Tower of Babel and the scattering of those rebellious ones over the face of the earth. Noah and Shem were not involved in the tower building and consequently would not suffer confusion of their language, but would continue to speak man's original language, which God gave to Adam. Ge 9. 1, 28, 29. 11. 1-9. A prophetic pattern. The prophets Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jesus Christ as well as the apostles Peter and Paul all spoke of God's servant Noah. Noah's days are shown by Jesus and Peter to be prophetic of the presence of the Son of Man and a future day of judgment and of destruction of the ungodly men. Jehovah, in sparing Noah and his family when he destroyed that wicked world, was setting a pattern for ungodly persons of things to come. 2 P 3. 5-7. 2. 5, 6. Isla 54. 9. S 14. 14, 20. Mount 24. 37-39. Heb 11. 7. 1 P 3. 20, 21. 2. Heb. No middle. R. One of Zelophehad's 5 daughters, of the tribe of Manasseh. Because Zelophehad died without sons, Jehovah decreed that the daughters should receive their father's tribal possession as inheritance. This established a legal precedent. Later it was established also that daughters who inherit should become wives of men of their own tribe in order to hold the inheritance, so that it would not circulate from tribe to tribe. New 26. 28-33. 27. 1-11. 36. 6-12. Jos 17. 3, 4. Nob. A city evidently in the territory of Benjamin and close to Jerusalem. While there is some question as to the precise location of Nob, Nehemiah 11. 31, 32 and Isaiah 10. 28-32 indicate that it was near Anathoth and possibly close to a hill from which one could see Jerusalem. Some tentatively identify it with a spot on Ras El Mushref Mount Scopus, about 1.5 kilometers 1 mi of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That would place it just end of the Mount of Olives. When no textoi acute miritra longo, nose, nostrils 509, 2. A city of the Jordan, captured by Noba. New 32. 39, 42 evidently the name Noba did not stick, because later it is called by its original name, Kanath. 1ch2. 23 The ruins at Kanawat, about 90 kilometers 60 mi of Damascus are commonly identified with the ancient site. 3. A place situated east of the Jordan and near Jolbaha in Gad. New 32. 34, 35. JG 8. 11 Its precise location is not known today. Noble. See leader, noble, prince. Nodab. One of the confederated groups overwhelmingly defeated with Jehovah's help by the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh. 1ch5. 18-22 Nothing more is known of this tribe, except the possible preservation of the name inlet of the village of New Deb, in the desert of Palestine. Nogar from a root meaning shine. Son of King David, born to him in Jerusalem. 1ch3. 5-7. 14. 3-6. Noha from a root meaning rest. Settle down. The fourth listed son of Benjamin. 1ch8. 1, 2 Since he is not named among those listed in Genesis chapter 46, he was probably born after the family entered Egypt. Some suppose that Noha was another name for Shephapram or was his descendant. New 26. 39. Neph. The usual Hebrew scripture name for Memphis, an important city of ancient Egypt. Isla 19. 13. J2. 16. 44. 1. 46. 14, 19. As 30. 13, 16. See Memphis. Nofar. According to the Masoretic text, apparently a place in Moab. New 21. 29, 30 Such a site is today unknown. North. In addition to the usual terms of fawn, north was also indicated by the direction left, since the orientation was facing toward the rising sun in the east. GE 14. 15. FTN in scriptural usage, north may denote a section of the earth. PS 107. 3. ISLA 43. 6. Lu 13. 29. A northerly direction X 26. 20. 1 Chi 7. 25. Re 21. 13. The northern sky job 26. 7. And various lands or kingdoms including Assyria Zep 2. 13 and Babylonia 46. 10 that was situated somewhat in and of the land inhabited by the Israelites. Though Babylon on the Euphrates River actually lay of Tyre, Ezekiel 26. 7 speaks of the king of Babylon as coming against Tyre from the north. Likewise, the calamity that Judah and Jerusalem were to experience from the Babylonians is referred to as coming out of the north. Ja 1. 14. 15 The reason for this appears to be that, when marching westward, the Babylonian armies took a northerly route and thus avoided passing through the desert. This was, in fact, the customary way, as Babylonian records show. Since various lands and kingdoms are assigned a northern location, the context and other related scriptures are often helpful in determining what is meant by north or land of the north. For example, Isaiah 21. 2, 9 and Daniel 5. 28 show that the nations from the land of the north mentioned at Jeremiah 50. 9 include the Medes, Persians, and Elamites. Apparently the nations attacking Babylon are viewed as a united army or common foe of Babylon, a congregation. Many of the nations involved were far in Babylonia 51. 27, 28, and much of Media was at least any of Babylon. The attack, too, evidently came from a northern direction, since Cyrus stopped the flow of the river and of the city. The king of the north. Facts of history provide still another basis for determining how north is to be understood in some texts. A case in point is the king of the north mentioned in Daniel chapter 11. Historical evidence indicates that the mighty king of Daniel 11:3 was Alexander the Great. After Alexander's death, the empire was eventually divided among his 4 generals. One of these generals, Seleucus Nicator, took Mesopotamia and Syria, this making him the ruler of territory situated in Palestine. Another general, Ptolemy Lagus, gained control of Egypt, to the south of Palestine. Therefore, with Seleucus Nicator and Ptolemy Lagus the long struggle between the king of the north and Otextoi acute Muritra longo, nose ring 510 Sol. GE 2. 7 This breath of life not only filled the lungs with air, but also imparted to the body the life force that is sustained by breathing. The breath being drawn into the body through the nostrils is essential to life. It sustains the life force. At the flood, everything in which the breath of the force of life was active in its nostrils, namely, all that were on the dry ground, died. GE 7. 22. The Hebrew word for nose or nostrils arf is frequently used to refer to the entire face. Adam was sentenced to earn his livelihood from the ground in the sweat of his face, literally, nose or nostrils. GE 3. 19 Lot bowed down with his face nose to the ground before the visiting angels. GE 19. 1. Sensitivity in smelling and tasting. The olfactory area is located in the upper part of the nasal cavity, where the olfactory nerves terminate in hair-like endings. Also fine endings of the trigeminal nerve are found in this area. The sense of smell in humans is very acute. According to an article in the Scientific American February 1964, p. 42. The sense of smell obviously is a chemical sense, and its sensitivity is proverbial. To a chemist, the ability of the nose to sort out and characterize substances is almost beyond belief. It deals with complex compounds that might take a chemist months to analyze in the laboratory. The nose identifies them instantly, even in an amount so small as little as a 10 millionth of a gram that the most sensitive modern laboratory instruments often cannot detect the substance, let alone analyze and label it. The nose also plays a large part in taste. There are 4 primary tastes: sweet, salt, sour, and bitter. These the taste buds in the mouth recognize. but much of the flavor in food is enjoyed because of the sense of smell. For example, a person whose nostrils are stopped up finds difficulty in distinguishing between two kinds of food, as most things then taste more or less flat. Beauty. Being located so prominently, a well-formed nose contributes greatly to facial beauty. In the Song of Solomon 7:4, the Shulamite girl's nose being likened to the Tower of Lebanon may have reference to the symmetry of her nose as adding dignity and beauty to her face. God required that Israel's priests, because they were his representatives before the people, be without blemish, one of the requirements being that no priest should have a slit or mutilate a nose. 21:18. Illustrative and figurative uses. The word for nose or nostril laugh is often used figuratively for anger, because of the violent breathing or snorting of an enraged person. See anger. It is also employed with reference to Jehovah's action, because of his anger. PS 18:8-15, or when he exerts his powerful active force. X 14:21-15:8. The disgusting idolatry into which Israel fell was a cause for the burning anger of Jehovah against them, which he expressed through the prophet Isaiah, saying, "These are as smoke in my nostrils, a fire burning all day long." Isa 65:5. Proverbs 30:32-33 states, "If you have acted senselessly by lifting yourself up, and if you have fixed your thought upon it, put the hand to the mouth. For the churning of milk is what brings forth butter, and the squeezing of the nose is what brings forth blood, and the squeezing out of anger is what brings forth quarreling." This strongly emphasizes the trouble that can be caused by one who speaks wrongly or who harbors up anger or lets it out unrestrained. Here, in a play on words, anger is the dual form of the word for nose. Nose ring. An ornamental ring worn on the nose. It was inserted either through the left or the right side of the nose or through the partition separating the nostrils, and was especially worn by women. GE 24:22-30-47. Isa 3:21. Ishmaelite men, however, according to some translations, also wore nose rings. JG 8:24-26. The Hebrew word for otextoi acute miritra longo, number, numeral 511 measurements are written out in full. Spelling out the numbers provides an added measure of accuracy and dependability in the manuscripts of the Hebrew scriptures, which have been copied many times, for, in copying, a numeral is usually easier to mistake than a word. In Hebrew, numbers above 10 are a combination of words, such as 12, 2 and 10 GE 14:4, except that 20 is the plural of 10. 30 a plural word derived from 3. 40 a plural word derived from 4, and so on. 100 is a separate word. 200 is the dual form. Other hundreds are composed of two words, as 300. The highest number expressed by one Hebrew word is 20,000, the dual form of 10,000 myriad. Larger numbers are a combination of words. For example, at 1 Chronicles 5:18 the number 44,760 is, literally, 40 and 4,007 of hundreds and 60. A million is written as 1,000 thousands. 2 Ch 14:9 Rebekah's family blessed her, saying, "O you, our sister, may you become thousands times 10,000 literally, thousands of myriads." Rebekah's posterity actually came to number many millions. GE 24:55-16 Daniel's vision Jehovah is shown as having 10,000 times 10,000 literally, a myriad of myriads standing before him. Jar 7:10. Occasionally numbers are used in an approximate sense, as round numbers, for example, at Psalm 90:10, where the psalmist speaks of man's age limit, and possibly also at 1 Kings 19:18, 7,000 who had not bowed to Baal, and 2 Chronicles 14:9 the million Ethiopians defeated by Asa. In the Christian Greek scriptures numerals are generally expressed in words. The number of the wild beast is in words in the Sinaitic and the Alexandrine manuscripts. Re 13:18. Bible usage not numerology. Since the Bible is a book of both history and prophecy, the numbers given therein may be either literal or symbolic. the context usually reveals in which sense a number is used. Certain numbers appear often in the Bible in an illustrative, figurative, or symbolic sense, and in such cases an understanding of their significance is vital to an understanding of the text. However, this Bible usage of numbers should not be confused with numerology, in which occult mysticism is attached to figures, their combinations, and numerical totals. Numerology apparently had its origin in ancient Babylon and, along with other forms of divination, comes under divine condemnation. 18. 10-12. In the following we will discuss a few of the figurative uses of certain numbers that are used prominently in the Bible. 1. This number, when used figuratively, conveys the thought of singleness, uniqueness, as well as unity and agreement in purpose and action. Jehovah our God is one Jehovah, said Moses. 6. For he alone is sovereign. He is unique. He does not share his glory with another, as is the case with pagan Trinitarian gods. Act 4. 24. Re 6. 10. Isra 42. 8. There is oneness in purpose and activity between Jehovah and Jesus Christ. Joe 10. 30. And there should be complete unity of Christ's disciples with God, with his Son, and with one another. Joe 17. 21. 3. 28. Such oneness is illustrated in the marriage arrangement. GE 2. 24. Mount 19. 6. F5. 28-32. 2. The number 2 frequently appears in a legal setting. Agreement in the accounts of 2 witnesses adds to the force of the testimony. 2 witnesses, or even 3, were required to establish a matter before the judges. This principle is also followed in the Christian congregation. 17. 6. 19. 15. Mount 18. 16. 2 Co 13. 1. 1 T 5. 19. Heb 10. 28. God adhered to this principle in presenting his Son to the people as mankind's Savior. Jesus said, "In your own law it is written, the witness of 2 men is true. I am one that bears witness about myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness about me." Joe 8. 17, 18. Doing something a second time. For example, repetition of a statement or vision, o texto e acute muritra longo, number, numeral 512. Good news, that God was now turning his attention to uncircumcised people of the nations, considered unclean by the Jews. Act 10. 1-16, 28-35, 47, 48. The intensity of Jehovah's holiness and cleanness is emphasized by the declaration of heavenly creatures. Holy, holy, holy is Jehovah. Isra 6. 3. Re 4. 8. Before taking the last earthly king of the line of David off the throne, Jehovah said, "A ruin, a ruin, a ruin I shall make it. As for this also, it will certainly become no one's until he comes who is the legal right, and I must give it to him." Here he emphatically showed there would be no Davidic kings sitting upon the throne at Jerusalem in his name. The throne would be absolutely vacant until God's time to establish his Messiah in kingdom power. As 21. 27. The intensity of woes to come to those dwelling on earth is forecast by the triple repetition of the declaration woe. Re 8. 13. 4. 4 is a number sometimes expressing universalness or foursquareness in symmetry and form. It is found 3 times at Revelation 7. 1. Here the 4 angels, all those in charge of the 4 winds, ready for complete destruction, stood on earth's 4 corners. They could let loose the winds obliquely or diagonally, and no quarter of the earth would be spared. Compared 8. 8. Isra 11. 12. Jah 49. 36. Zech 2. 6. Mount 24. 31. The New Jerusalem is 4 square, equal in every dimension, being in fact cubical in shape. Re 21. 16 other figurative expressions using the number 4 are found at Zechariah 1. 18-21. 6. 1-3. Revelation 9. 14, 15. 6. This number at times represents imperfection. The number of the wild beast is 666 and is called a man's number, indicating that it has to do with imperfect, fallen man, and it seems to symbolize the imperfection of that which is represented by the wild beast. The number 6 being emphasized to a third degree, the 6 appearing in the position of units, tens, and hundreds therefore highlights the imperfection and deficiency of that which the beast represents, or pictures. Re 13. 18. 7. 7 is used frequently in the scriptures to signify completeness. At times it is referenced to bringing work toward completion. Or it can refer to the complete cycle of things as established or allowed by God. By completing his work toward the earth in 6 creative days and resting on the 7th day, Jehovah set the pattern for the whole Sabbath arrangement, from the 7-day week to the Jubilee year that followed a 7 times 7 year cycle. Acts 20. 10. 25. 2, 6, 8. The festival of unleavened bread and the festival of booths were each 7 days long. Acts 34. 18. 23. 34:7 appears often in connection with the Levitical rules for offerings. 4. 6. 16. 14, 19. New 28. 11 and for cleansings. 14. 7, 8, 16, 27, 51. 2 Chi 5. 10. The 7 congregations of Revelation, with their characteristics, give a complete picture of all the congregations of God on earth. Re 1. 20. 3. 22. The 7 heads of the wild beast. Re 13. 1 showed the limit to which the beast would be allowed to develop. Although the scarlet-colored wild beast is called an 8th king, it springs from the 7 and does not exist apart from the 7-headed wild beast. Re 17. 3, 9-11, as is true also of the image of the wild beast. Re 13. 14. Similarly, the 2-horned wild beast is actually coexistent with the original wild beast whose mark it tries to put on all persons. Re 13. 11, 16, 17. Jehovah was long-suffering with Israel but warned them that if, despite his discipline, they ignored him, he would then chastise them 7 times, thoroughly, for their sins. 26. 18, 21, 28. In historical sections of the scriptures, 7 frequently occurs to denote completeness, or doing a work completely. The Israelites exercised full faith and obedience by marching for 7 days around Jericho, encompassing it 7 times on the O Textoi Acute Muritra Longo. Numbers, Book of 513. Things of God's adversary, Satan the devil, in his all-out fight to oppose God and his people. Re 1. 4, 12, 16. 5. 1, 6. 8. 2. 10. 3. 12. 3. 13. 1. 15. 1, 7. 17. 3, 10. And other texts. Multiples of 7 are used in a similar sense of completeness. 70 10 times 7 is employed prophetically in the 70 weeks of Daniel's prophecy dealing with Messiah's coming. Dar 9. 24-27. See 70 weeks. Jerusalem and Judah lay desolate 70 years, because of disobedience to God, until the land had paid off completely its Sabbaths. 2 Ch 36. 21. J 25. 11. 29. 10. Dar 9. 2. Zek 1. 12. 7. 5. 77. A repetition of 7 in a number was equivalent to saying indefinitely or without limit. Jesus counsels Christians to forgive their brothers to that extent. Mount 18. 21, 22. Since God had ruled that anyone killing Cain, the murderer, must suffer vengeance 7 times, Lamech, who apparently killed a man in self-defense, said, "If 7 times Cain is to be avenged, then Lamech 70 times and 7. GE 4. 15, 23, 24. 8. The number 8 was also used to add emphasis to the completeness of something one more than 7, the number generally used for completeness, thus sometimes representing abundance. Jehovah reassured his people of deliverance from the threat of Assyria, saying that there should be raised up against the Assyrian